Alrighty, so 3-3, or yeah, day 3. That's a lot of threes. We're gonna word problems, our favorite thing ever. I get that, but these notes actually look almost identical to the addition of subtraction word problem notes, but only now we're just going to use a subtraction expression instead. So it does say write the subtraction expression. So very similar to how we started the other day. I had like a blank, only now we're going to have a minus sign in between these two terms. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my subtraction expression. And then we need to simplify it and answer it in a complete sentence. Because these are your notes, I'm actually not going to write it in complete sentence. I might just kind of give it to you in words, or maybe just like write it out and make sure be like, hey, you need to include this. But again, because these are notes, I'm not going to write a complete sentence with a period at the end of your sentence. So the BRT football team was sacked for a loss of 5 yards on their first play. So remember, we kind of dissect these word problems because we don't like seeing word problems. Instead, we want to see the numbers. So the PRT football team, they were sacked for a loss of 5 yards, right? We know that that's like a -5. So I'm going to start right there, -5. Remember, you can get rid of all of the other information if you would like, because it's pretty much unnecessary, right? Okay, now this is when it gets a little confusing, so make sure that you're staying with me. It says, then they lost 6 more, right? So they lost 6 more yards on the running play. However, this lost right here, this is being already represented by the subtraction sign in the actual expression. So I've already created that lost right there with that minus sign with the subtraction. So then I'm going to know that I have 6, so I'm going to put 6 in the rest of my expression. Okay, keeping that in mind, the reason that we're using that minus sign for the word lost is because I need a subtraction expression. And a lot of you right now are thinking, well, that 6 needs to be a -6 because I'm losing it, which is fantastic. However, because this is a subtraction expression, the loss is being represented by that minus sign. So once I create the subtraction expression, now I can go ahead and start kind of simplifying it in order to get my final answer. So essentially what we do anyways is turn this minus sign into a plus sign and add the opposite. So I'm changing this -5 minus 6. Sorry, I just need a little bit more space. I'm going to change that to addition and make my 6 the opposite. So essentially it is what we were thinking originally, like a loss of 5 and then a loss of 6. So I add them together. However, because I said you need a subtraction expression, that lost needs to be represented by the minus sign. So then when I simplify that out, I get the answer of -11 yards. So in your final answer, remember, you can't just say we have a loss of 11 yards. You have to say something about altogether or overall. Remember those kind of buzzwords. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a star and write overall. Please do that with me. So you're going to write overall because there were 2 total plays. You can't just say we were sacked for 11 yards. You have to say overall, the PRT football team lost 11 yards. All right, moving right along. Remember, if you do need anything paused, please feel free to just ask Miss G to pause it. Alrighty, let's get started on number 2. So it says a roller coaster begins at 90 feet above ground level. So we know if it's 90 feet above ground level, that first number in our subtraction expression is going to be 90. And remember, you can get rid of all of the other non-important information. Okay, we're treating this word problem, we're kind of dissecting it to come up with just the most important information that we need. And then the next sentence, it says, it then descends 105 feet. So quick reminder, we're not creating an addition expression because our addition expression would end up being 90 plus, and then descending, whenever we descend, that means to go down. So plus the -105. However, we are creating that subtraction expression. So the word descends is going to be in place of kind of that minus sign. So I'm going to take that first number, 90 minus, and then descending 105 feet. So I'm going to use 105 feet. I know that's also pretty important. And I need that subtraction expression because that's where I have to start. Okay, then once I'm here, yes, you can add the opposite. So right here, this minus sign, I'm turning it into a plus sign. The 105 does turn into a -105. So I have people in the past, and they've actually written the addition expression first. So they said, hey, it's 90 plus a -105. But then when they see that, then in the directions they see it needs to actually be a subtraction problem. They just get rid of that plus sign and just kind of move that negative or that minus sign over to create the subtraction. You're more than welcome to do that if that makes more sense to you. Okay, or you can create the subtraction sign, and then once you add the opposite to create our addition expression, just look back up and make sure that it makes sense. So 90 feet above ground, we have 90 plus, and then it descends 105 feet. Remember we said descends goes down, which is indicated by that negative 105. So once you've created that subtraction expression, go ahead and leave that subtraction expression so I very much can see it. I know I've been kind of writing over it. But then in your work, yes, you're going to take 90, and then instead of the minus sign, you're going to plus, and then it's a negative 105. So make sure that you do, in fact, have this original expression. That way I can easily see it. Then once we go ahead and start simplifying it out, I come up with my scoreboard. I have 90, I have 105. I know that the 105 team won, and they won by 15 points. So our final answer is negative 15. So your sentence, it says, find the height of the coaster at the first descent. So you would say, or after the first descent. So you could even say that after the first descent, our roller coaster is now at 15 feet below ground level. Okay, or something of that effect, like during the roller coaster, or overall where I'm at is 15 feet below the ground level. Alrighty, so let's look at number 3 now. So 3, it says last week the student council account was at negative $450, but after their fundraiser, the account is at negative $225. So good, we've gone up, right? We were at negatives, really far negatives. Now we've gotten to just a smaller negative, which means we've gotten more money. So it says find the difference between their final amount and the amount that they started with, and then describe its meaning. So I kind of just helped us with the meaning, but that's okay. It says find the difference. So hopefully when you see that buzzword difference, we know that means to subtract, which yes, we are clearly doing the subtraction notes. So we know that we're taking one number and I'm subtracting another number. Okay, and then actually in this little sentence it says find the difference between. It actually lists them out for us. So it says their final amount. So I'm starting with the final amount. So looking at these two amounts, I'm going to go back up to the first sentence. It says last week, the student council was at negative 450, but then after their fundraiser, their account is at negative 225. So the final amount is what they ended up with. And they ended up with this number over here, this negative 225. So that was the final amount that they ended up. Okay, so we're finding the difference between the final amount and then the amount that they started with. So the amount that they started with is very clearly the other amount, right? So minus the 450. So then once I always set up my subtraction expression, I always go back and I'm like, hey, let's double check. Last week, that's where we started, that's where we ended. And then the sentence says, find the difference between the final amount, so negative 225 minus the negative 450. And then we're going to describe the meaning once we get that final answer. So here's my expression. I'm going to go ahead and leave that one alone. I'm going to do some work over here. So negative 225 minus a negative 450. Hopefully we see those two minus signs or the two negatives right next to each other. I'm just adding those two things together. And then in my scoreboard, I have a plus sign. I have a minus sign. I have 450. And then I have 225 over here. I know my positive team won. And they ended up winning by 225. So what that means, when I circle that in, it's a positive. So what that means is that we gained $225, which I kind of explained that at the beginning. I said, hey, we started at negative 450 way down there, but then we went up to negative 225. So that $225, you could say in a sentence that after the fundraiser or over the course of the fundraiser, we ended up earning $225. All right, again, if you do need Miss Ginnivan to pause it, she definitely can. We just have a couple more. Please stay with me. Again, this was intended for 2 different days, but because I am gone, I'm going to mix a couple things up. 2 more questions. Let's do it. If you do need Miss G to kind of pause it, and if you need to kind of stretch your legs, that's okay. If not, let's just keep on cruising. All right, number 4, it says, in golf, scores are often stated as the number of strokes above or below par for the course. 4 golfers, they played 2 rounds of golf during the weekend. The table kind of lists their scores in relationship to par. So the first one, it says, find the difference between. So we kind of just discussed this up above. I said, hey, find the difference. So we know that that means to subtract. So I'm taking 2 numbers. And then once it says between, the first number that you get, or the first term that you get, is gonna go in that first term for your subtraction expression. So the first one that I'm looking at here is Diane's round 2 score. So we're gonna look up in our table, Diane. I see Diane. She looks like she's right here. And then her round 2 score of the 2, I know that this one is gonna be her round 2 score. So let's go ahead and put -4 for Diane's round 2 score. So again, that first one that we list, when it says the difference between, I said Diane's round 2 score, so that's our first term. And then the next one that we list is Judy's round 1 score. So in finding her, we find Judy. Here's Judy. Her round 1 looks to be this -3. So I'm going to go ahead and shove that in here. Once I create that subtraction expression, go ahead and look back up, double check. All right, feel pretty good about it, so I'm going to rewrite it over here. -4 minus a -3. I know that minus and negative right next to each other becomes a big plus sign. So really, I just have -4 plus 3. So that's a DSL problem. I know that the 4 is bigger than the 3. So when I take 4 minus 3, I get 1. And then 1, I have to keep that larger number. I know 4 is larger. So -1 is our final answer. All right, letter B. Find the difference between... So again, I know that I'm subtracting 2 numbers with a big fat minus sign in between because of that word difference. The first one is James' higher score. So when I look up at James, we find James, here he is, his higher score between 2 and 7. His higher score is going to be this 7 in the round 2. So that was a much higher score. He did not do as well on that one. So 7 minus, and then Patrick's lower score. So we find Patrick found him. His lower score, his better score is this round 1. So I'm going to plug in that -6 right there for Patrick. And then once I create that expression, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it over here. So 7 minus a -6. The reason I'm going to rewrite it is just because I like seeing that clean original expression of 7 minus a -6. But I do know that if there is a minus a negative, I just make that big plus sign. And my final answer between those two scores, or the difference between those two scores, is 13. All right, my people, last question. All right, we can do it. I believe in us. So Max is 38 feet. He's underground touring a cavern. He then goes down a ladder 7 more feet. What's his new location? So in the first sentence, I know I'm 38 feet underground in a tavern. What integer represents that? Hopefully we know -38. I'm going to start there. But this whole thing is about subtraction. It is no longer addition, right? So keeping that in mind, he then goes down a ladder 7 feet. Remember, down is already represented right there by that minus sign. So really, it's just now 7 feet. So I have that 7. Okay, also, you can think of kind of like a picture. If I'm going down 38 feet, right, and then I'm going down some more, okay, I'm going down 7 more. I'm going to be at a total somewhere down here, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Because I set this up, we have -38 minus 7. I'm going to turn that minus sign into a plus, add the opposite. So really, these two are the same numbers. So -38 plus a -7, or same signs, not same numbers, rather. And then when I add those two things together, I get -45. Which again makes sense because I'm way down here. I went down 38, went down 7 more. I'm down here way down low, -45 feet. Also, if you would have said -38 minus, and then you used the down with the 7 for -7, that would have totally thrown us off. This is BAD bad. So hopefully you feel good here. You would say his new location, or Max's new location, is 45 feet underground. Remember, we do not say -45 feet underground because that's like the double negative. So you would just say 45 feet below the ground. Alrighty, my people, the rest of the time is yours. However, it better not be out of control or out of hand. Mrs. Ginnivan knows to write your name down. She will for sure let me know who is not working given the time that you have. So make sure that you're on your best behavior. I miss you all, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.